So I finally got my hands on the iPhone 16 Pro, and my first thoughts are that it's actually a much bigger upgrade than most reviewers had said. Now, I watched a lot of video reviews on the iPhone 16 Pro, and I was actually trying to hold off on buying it until early next year, but I'm coming from the iPhone 14 Pro, so that's where I'm basing my experience off of for this video. Starting off, I actually think the action button and the camera control are the two biggest upgrades here, for me at least. This makes this iPhone more customizable than any other iPhone in the past. And even though some of the software features had landed in iOS 18, where you can change the lock screen shortcuts that are typically for flashlight and camera to something else, I didn't feel compelled to do that on the 14 Pro because there weren't any other buttons to take the place of those two things. So adding in the action button to do something cool, I do wish it would let you do a single press, a double press, and then a press and hold, so you could have 3 different shortcuts or 3 different things tied to that button. Unfortunately, it is just a press and hold, and you can load one thing. So I have that currently set to load my home note in Apple Notes, which is similar to the Forever Notes framework, and it has links to all of my most used notes. Now, I have kept the bottom left shortcut on the lock screen as the flashlight because I have too much muscle memory there. But I did replace the right-hand side, which is typically the camera, to Quick Note. So that lets me jot something down in Apple Notes really quickly, get in and get out, and move on with my day. And from the lock screen, you can still swipe over to the right to access the camera, or now the camera control button will launch the camera with a single press. I find that very helpful, and as a left-handed person, I'm often picking up the phone and hitting the camera control button anyways, or at least that's where my finger lands. So it's a convenient way to get into the camera quickly. Now, continuing on with camera control, I do find the use a little bit finicky. I am still learning how to use it, but the kind of half press that you have to do and half double press to move through the menu systems, I'd say actually is one of the least intuitive designs that Apple has done in a long time, but the button does do what it's supposed to do. You know, you can change things like focal length or exposure, you can take pictures, you can add styles and move through the menus that way. I do still find it's easier and faster to move through the menus in the camera app, just touching the screen as you normally would. In store, I did notice that the screen is slightly brighter on the 16 Pro than the 14 Pro. Now, after you use it for a week or two and you don't have that device, side by side to compare with one another, it definitely isn't noticeable. But, when I was in the store, I slid my thing up to max brightness on the 14 Pro. 16 Pro was on max brightness, and I could tell it had a little bit more, and the screen was just slightly, looked better overall. Part of that could be the smaller bezels as well. Now, Apple Intelligence is kind of a flop at this point, but it will get better over time. I really don't find myself using any of the writing tools or Apple Intelligence tools thus far. If I'm interfacing with AI, I do still go to ChatGPT or Claude, depending on what I'm doing. I find that I like those answers and interfaces better for the time being, but I am hopeful that these Apple Intelligence features will get better over time. And they might end up being helpful, being built in directly to things like Apple Mail and Apple Notes. Probably the biggest reason that I picked this up over the 14 Pro is the ergonomics, and they are a whole lot better. The slightly rounded sides make a huge difference. When you're holding them side by side in hand, the 14 Pro kind of felt like it had sharp edges, and I never really liked the stainless steel sides of the 14 Pro. It was always difficult to get a grip on that phone without a case, which led me to putting my expensive phone into a case, and I never really got to hold the actual design in my hand. When I pick up the 16 Pro, however, the ergonomics are just a lot better. The slightly brushed titanium sides, the slightly rounded corners make this probably the first iPhone that I've ever held that I didn't feel like I needed to put a case on it immediately. So I've actually been enjoying using this phone with no screen protector and no case on it for the last week and a half. I did pick up an Apple silicone case because I tend to throw my phone around in the gym and the garage. So when I'm working on cars or whatever, I do want to be able to protect the phone. and not beat it up. I hope this lasts a couple years, just like the iPhone 14 Pro did for me. And the cameras, of course, are noticeably better. You get Apple Log here. On the 1X camera, you get the ability to cycle between 24, 28, and 35 millimeter lenses. And that selection for the 1X camera is nice. I am kind of a camera nerd. I've got a 24 millimeter and a 35 millimeter lens. I do like those focal lengths and switching between them. And the addition of the 5X camera is nice to get a little bit of extra reach and not really sacrificing any quality. The camera styles, which is new for this year, is also a nice addition. I think if you're somebody who's taken photos and has a highly curated Instagram feed and you want everything to look the same, then having these photographic styles is great. You could just apply that, leave it on. Every picture you take is going to come out looking the same. And you can actually get some really good results and not have to, put the file into an editing app or anything like that. Now, if you're taking raw photos, the photographic styles is obviously not available because those are meant to be put into some other software and edited and color graded how you see fit. And the microphones are also a big improvement. If you are doing your main content creation from your iPhone, the mics this year are a giant leap forward. They have a bunch of different settings, studio mode and isolation that removes noise. Plenty of people have detailed those in their videos, so I'm just going to tell you, yep, it works, and the microphone sounds a lot better on the 16 Pro than the 14 Pro. So I watched a lot of videos, and most of them said, if you have the 14 Pro or 15 Pro, then the 16 Pro isn't really that big of an upgrade. And I think for somebody who upgrades every year, that's very true. But if you used the 14 Pro for 2 years like I did, and you might have started to get tired of having, it was kind of heavy. It was a little bit of a brick when you hold it in your hands. If you were tired of those things, then the 16 Pro is actually a really great upgrade. To boot, you get better battery life. My battery on the 14 Pro was degraded down to 89%. So I definitely was struggling to make it through the day. And on the 16 Pro, you start with a fresh battery. The battery's a little bit bigger. And it's definitely a noticeable improvement. I actually didn't have to charge it last night because when using Apple CarPlay on the way home from work, the phone was charging. So I still had like 89% when I went to sleep. So those are kind of my first thoughts. As I use this phone over the coming weeks and months, I'll make a full review eventually. But for now, I'm really happy with this upgrade. I definitely think it was worth it. And I think some tech reviewers missed the mark saying that it wasn't really a worthy upgrade over the 14 Pro. I don't agree. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Did you pick up the new iPhone? How have you been liking it? That's it for this week. I'll see you next time. Later.